In January 1559, Elizabeth I was crowned Queen of England. She was the last of the great Tudor dynasty, a bright star who dazzled both the nation and the world. The achievement of most stars fades quickly, but Elizabeth has lasted for nearly 4 centuries, and it's easy to see why. She reigned for 45 tumultuous years. Her ships defeated the Spanish Armada and sailed round the globe. In her time, Shakespeare wrote plays and Spenser wrote poems. English noblemen and foreign princes wooed her, but she, the Virgin Queen, made love to that loyalist of audiences, the English people. Elizabeth was one of the daughters of King Henry VIII, but the right of women to succeed to the throne was still in doubt, and her path there would be perilous. Her father would kill her mother, and she would be disinherited. Her sister would imprison her in the Tower and threaten her with execution. Men would love her for her royal status and not for herself. She would be sexually abused by her own stepfather. Most monarchs are handed their crowns on a plate. Elizabeth got hers by cunning and courage. Elizabeth's sex was a disappointment to Henry. Astrologers had assured him that the baby to be born in September 1533 would be a boy. He already had one daughter, the 17-year-old Mary. What he wanted was a son and heir. But although Elizabeth was a girl, the magnificent christening planned for the longed-for prince went ahead. Every detail had been seen to, down to the brazier to warm the water in the font. She was even proclaimed princess, the title of the heir to the throne.
Elizabeth ego te baptizo in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
According to the French ambassador, the whole occasion was so perfect that nothing was lacking. Actually, things were far from perfect at Elizabeth's baptism, because Elizabeth was the child of a second marriage, and Henry's second marriage, like many second marriages today, aroused very strong feelings. For instance, the imperial ambassador refused point blank to attend the baptism. He even refused to recognize Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, as Henry's wife. Instead, he sneeringly referred to her as the whore. And as for little Elizabeth, she was the bastard. Even one of the officiating clergy, when he was asked, had the baby been baptized in hot water or in cold, replied, hot, but not hot enough. Henry divorced his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, because she had not given him a son. But now her replacement, Anne Boleyn, was having her own gynecological problems. After 2 miscarriages, she finally had a baby boy, but it was stillborn. Anne had failed in her principal duty as royal breeding machine. Meanwhile, Henry had fallen in love with another woman, Jane Seymour. For Anne, the end came with terrifying swiftness. She was accused of multiple adultery with 4 of the gentlemen of the king's chamber and of incest with her own brother. All of the accused were found guilty, and Anne herself was executed here on Tower Green on the 19th of May, 1536. Henry showed a single gesture of mercy towards the woman that he'd once loved so much, and her head was removed at a single stroke with a sword, rather than being hacked off with the axe. Elizabeth was only 3 when her mother was executed as a traitor and a whore. For many children, this would have been a lifelong trauma, but Elizabeth seems to have airbrushed her mother from her memory. It was to be Henry who filled her world. Anne Boleyn's fall marked a major step down in the world for the young Elizabeth. Her parents' marriage was declared null and void. She was now illegitimate and unable to inherit the throne. So, instead of the right high and mighty princess, the Lady Elizabeth, inheritrix of the crown of England, she became the Lady Elizabeth, the king's second bastard daughter. Elizabeth's sudden loss of status threw the little court where she had been brought up into confusion. Even her governess, Lady Bryan, didn't know what to do and wrote to the King's Minister, Thomas Cromwell, for guidance. How should the little girl be treated? By the way, could she please have some more clothes? She'd outgrown absolutely everything she had. But above all, where should she eat? Was she old enough to eat here in the great hall, served on the dais? Or should she continue to eat in her chamber, where it would be easier to keep her away from the rich foods that were so bad for her teeth and her digestion? Whatever her status, no one could forget that Elizabeth was Anne Boleyn's daughter. And it was in order to marry Anne that Henry had broken away from Rome and made himself head of the church in England. It was a revolution, and one of its victims was the monasteries. They were amongst the greatest English landowners. Their assets were seized and their buildings dismantled. One of them was Glastonbury Abbey, then the largest church in England.
When I look out from my church across the other side of the road from these ruins, I'm filled with a feeling or a sense of sadness, a sense of loss, a sense of disbelief to a degree that such destruction could have taken place in a country that was supposedly very religious and Catholic. This abbey here was a place of pilgrimage. The abbey contained a statue of Our Lady, which is what Catholics call St. Mary, and people would have come from far and wide to pay their respects, to say their prayers, to make their offerings and ask for various helps. Within the space of 9 years from the Reformation, the dissolution of the monasteries, this went from being one of the grandest Catholic churches in this country to pretty well what we see around us today. Hardly one stone on top of another.
The damage to the Catholic Church wasn't just physical, it was spiritual too. Out of these ruins would grow a new Protestant faith. Henry's religious revolution would divide his country and his family.